Okay, completing the square. This time we're going to start when b is odd, and what happens with that. So the first step stays the same as before. So we just get all the x's on one side, so we're going to add 5 to each side. Then we're going to take half of b and square that and add that to each side. So here I took half of b, right here, and then I squared it and add that to each side. So now I'm ready to factor this side. It becomes x, and this is a positive 5 halves, so plus 5 halves squared equals, and you can use your calculator for this part right here. So now we're ready to take the square root of each side. So you get x plus 5 halves equals plus or minus square root of 45 over 2. We can actually break down the square root of 45. That turns into 3 square root 5. So if we can simplify any square roots, we should. Now we're going to subtract 5 halves from each side. I'm going to write that over here. So again, I just subtracted 5 halves from each side. And now we have common denominators, so we want to try and keep this into one gigantic fraction. So everything's going to be over 2, and they're the same. If they're not the same, we're going to have to make it the same. But since they are the same, we can just go ahead and rewrite the tops. Negative 5 plus or minus 3 square root 5. And now we are done. And remember, this part right here implies that this is 2 answers. 2 answers for the highest degree. Second one's very similar. So if you want to pause the video and give it a try, and then I'll do the work here in a second. So we get all the x's to one side. Now we're ready to take half of b and square it and add that to each side. So here that is. And then we have half of b, which is negative 3 over 2. Don't forget about your signs. And we're ready to factor this left side. And since this is negative, it's minus 3 halves. Equals, and we're just going to use our calculator for this side. And we get 5 over 4. So now we're ready to take the square root of each side. Don't forget your plus or minus. We can do the square root of the top, or we can't do the square root of the top, but we can do the square root of the bottom. Square root of 4 is 2. So now we're ready to add 3 halves to each side. And I notice that the denominators are the same. So now it's going to be a positive 3 plus or minus square root 5 all over 2. So I kind of skipped the middle step from the last one. This part right here. Again, because I noticed that these were already the same, so we can go ahead and just add the tops and put it all over 2. Again, this implies 2 different answers. Okay, now we're going to try when a is not 1, like this right here. We have a 2 in front. So this is the only example in the video. I have more for class if we need to go over it. But basically the rules are almost the same with just one extra step. So the first part, get all your x's on one side and the number to the other. So we're going to subtract 7 from each side. Now we have that. We need to get this x squared, or this 2x squared, into just a regular x squared. So we need to turn it from 2x squared to x squared. And the only way that we can do that is by dividing this by 2. 2 divided by 2 gives you the 1 that's in front of this x squared. But we can't just divide this by 2. We actually have to divide everything by 2. In essence, whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other. So now these cancel out, and then this makes negative 6, or minus 6x, and that will equal negative 7 over 2. So now that we have all the x's on one side and the x squared just has a 1 in front, old rules still apply. Take half of b And we're going to add that to each side, so half would be here, would just be a negative 3. And then don't forget the square and add that to each side. Now we're ready to factor the left side. And then we can just use our calculators to do the right side. Once we have that, we are ready to take the square root of both sides. So x minus 3 equals square root of 11 over 2, plus or minus. Now off to the side, and I'm going to end up erasing this. Remember that square root of 11 over 2 is the same thing as square root 11 over square root 2. We are not allowed to have square roots on the bottom. So in order to clean that up, we need to multiply top and bottom by square root 2. Remember, anything over itself is 1, so we're just multiplying this fraction by 1, which is allowed because 1 times anything is just itself. We're just making it look different. So now we can multiply straight across. Square root of 11 times square root 2 is square root 22 over square root 2 times square root 2. The square roots cancel out and you're just left with 2. That's it. Remember, you can't do anything with this since the square root's on top, so you can't simplify any further. That is exactly what you see it. So I'm going to take that, I'm going to write this up top here, and I'm going to clean this up a little bit. So I'm going to write this here. X minus 3 equals plus or minus to the square root of 11 over 2. Now it is the square root 22 over 2. We're ready to add 3 to each side. And as I said before, we want this as one gigantic fraction. So we got to get 3 and change that so it has a denominator of 2 to match this. 3 and 6 halves are the same thing. I just took 3 over 1 and multiplied it by 2 over 2. Plus or minus square root 22 over 2. Now we have common denominators. We can add the tops and put it all over 2. And those are your 2 answers. Up, forgot my plus or minus, but those imply your 2 answers there. So we're going to practice this. If you have any questions, let me know, and we can always go over some more examples.